Why would we be concerned with acts of violence in other parts of the country, the world? Why would we march and demonstrate against those acts that occur outside of our very own communities? We do so because we cannot deny that we are interconnected with all who live, eat, and breathe just as we do. Martin Luther King Jr., in his letter from Birmingham jail, I'll be quoting quite a bit from him, and every year I want to honor Martin Luther King Jr. I also, as a woman, want to recall that he did have his own challenges with his treatment of women. I just have to say that. Just like Thomas Jefferson was a Unitarian, but he owned slaves, so we forgive these men who lived in times that are different than ours, and we still learn and live and breathe and are encouraged by the words that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote. He wrote, "I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." How many times have we heard that? This is where that came from. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all, indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside alligator idea. Anyone who lives in the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds. He wrote that because he was being, his colleagues and other clergy were saying, "Why are you in Birmingham? What does it matter to you? And he was trying to express his concern that we speak out for all of us when one of us is suffering. Although MLK penned this letter in 1963 at the height of the civil rights fight for justice and rights, today we too recognize that basic human dignity and rights are still being denied." I don't know about you, but I'm angry. Like so many of us, I worked hard last year and the year before, years before when he was president. I worked hard to say, okay, we can make this right. I understand people who say states should have the rights to govern their own money, their own states. However, I tried hard to affirm people's interests. With ICE barging in one city after another, one town, one home, one vehicle after another, as government officials grab, pin down, and shoot immigrants and citizens alike, I call bullshit. Right now, our citizens are victims of broken promises. Martin Luther King Jr. pointed this out in 1963. The only difference between then and now is that injustice then was pointed at one population, one race. MLK Jr. also tried to have faith in agreements and negotiations, only to have human rights denied again. He wrote, "In the course of negotiations, certain promises were made by the merchants, for example, to remove the store's humiliated racial signs. On the basis of these promises, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and his leaders of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights agreed to a moratorium of all demonstrations. As the weeks and months went by, we realized that we were the victims of a broken promise. A few signs briefly were removed, and then they were returned. The others remained. As in so many past experiences, our hopes had been blasted, and the shadow of deep disappointment settled upon us. We had no alternative except to prepare for direct action, whereby we would present our very bodies as a means of laying our case before the conscience of the local and national community. Today, as in the past, we recognize that moneyed Sequestered, privileged individuals in leadership positions are running out of control with no moral obligation for the roles they filled. Martin Luther King had something to say about that. It is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture, but as Reinhold Niebuhr said, groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. We know through painful experiences, he said, that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long justice too long delayed. You know the end of this. Justice too long delayed is denied. We look forward to the time when the power of love will replace the love of power, said William Gladstone in 1832. I don't know about you, but I can no longer just wait and hope and wish and pray. Last weekend, several of you in this room attended a vigil remembering immigrants' rights ally Renee Good and recalling the name of 9 immigrants who lost their lives when ICE agents descended. This was last week at the UU congregation in St. Pete. How many of you were there with me? I sat with Linda Stoller, and it was a lot of people from Andy Oliver's church as well. So we listened to the names, not only of Renee Good, but 9 other immigrants who had died because of ICE. And then the next day at 10 o'clock at Clearwater Mall, I stood with signs. Many of you in here were doing that too, saying, "Go away, ICE." And then there was another vigil on Sunday night. I'm exhausted, but I'm only exhausted. I'm not shot. I'm not beaten and pulled out of a car. So on those occasions, I stood there, me, the introvert, who is overwhelmed with noise and crowds. And I thought to myself, is this doing any good? Can any of us possibly make a difference? I can't believe I even had those thoughts. One Christmas years ago, when I served our Unitarian Universalist values with the UU Church in Savannah, if you've ever gone to Savannah and done the tour bus, occasionally they'll go by a church they call the Jingle Bells Church. That is our Unitarian Universalist church in Savannah. So I served with them one year, and my brother who lives in Savannah had invited my spouse and I to go to a reenactment of the journey of the Holy Family, the parents of Jesus, Mary and Joseph, as they were humble peasants traveling the land and to go to the direction of the child's birth. So I thought, okay, my brother is pretty adamantly fundamentalist Christian, but he's inviting us to this reenactment, so we're going to go. There was one powerful element of this experience that stood out for me. You see, at the start, each participant received a yellow piece of paper. It was evidence of our citizenship. We were told not to lose that paper, and then we were instructed to travel the grounds in small groups in the dark to witness small vignettes of this story, the Annunciation or the announcement of Mary's pregnancy by the angel Gabriel, and more. At one of the stops, remember, we're in darkness, we're walking with groups. At one of the stops, out of nowhere, a huge horse appeared. Seated atop the animal was a Roman soldier covered in metal, in armor from head to toe, and carrying a pointed spear, a lance. The soldier yelled, "You there, show me your papers now." I thought I was going to pee my pants. I was so frightened. But listen, at that moment, I felt completely vulnerable. I, a white woman, felt completely vulnerable. I had no weapons and no protection, and the soldier had everything needed to inflict violence. Although it was a moment of reenactment, I can recall how I felt in my body from that experience. We are aware that Renee Good was doing nothing wrong other than being part of a group of demonstrators against unjust actions. In our Unitarian Universalist history during the march in Selma, our very own UU Viola Liuzzo on March 25, 1965, was shot by 3 Klan members while she was driving activists to and from the airport and the city. One of us. In both of those cases, Renee Good and Liuzzo, the women were immediately painted as evil against the U.S. government and considered extremists. Good was immediately called, quote, a domestic terrorist by the Trump administration. Within 24 hours back then of Liuzzo, J. Edgar Hoover, launched a smear campaign against her. He leaked false information to the press, the FBI agents, and select politicians, claiming that there were, quote, puncture marks in her arm indicating her use of hypodermic needles and her use of drugs, and that she was sitting very, very close to that Negro in the car, and that it appeared like they were necking. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. All these years later. So U.S. citizens and immigrants, by simply peacefully assembling, we are being called extremists. Martin Luther King Jr. had something to say about this as well. He said, but though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, I continued to think about the matter, and I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. I mean, was Jesus not an extremist for love? Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness an ever-flowing stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? Bear in body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise, so help me God. And then there was Abraham Lincoln. This nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And then Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and I will say women, all individuals are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? And so the rise of nonviolent opposition, through that, MLK learned about nonviolence from the Hindu leader Mahatma Gandhi, who taught about the role of nonviolence and who counseled ways to practice nonviolent demonstrations. Do you know a lot of the people, when I went to the White House, when people are preparing to go to Minneapolis, even when we go to march in Tallahassee, there's some preparation for training you not to give in to your inner impulse, which is to push somebody who's yelling at you. Quote, King said, nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. I have earnestly opposed violent tension, but there is a type of constructive nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent tension that is already alive, we bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with in all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tensions that it creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. People said these are awful times. Yes, they're awful times, but I have to tell you, the amount of injustice and oppression and racism has been sitting there, always sitting there. Now it's out in the open. But here's the thing about nonviolent opposition. As much as you feel compelled, there is no hitting, no biting, no spitting on people allowed. It takes practice to simply resist without promoting more violence. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke frankly about how his group prepared for nonviolent actions. He wrote, quote, "We began a series of workshops on nonviolence, and we repeatedly asked ourselves, am I able to accept blows without retaliation? Am I able to endure the ordeal of jail?" So I know firsthand that it takes practice and deep personal insight to be able to commit such a demeanor, that is, to remain solid in the face of insults and being pushed around. Try escorting women at the Bread and Roses Health Clinic in Clearwater on a Thursday or a Saturday morning when men with bullhorns call you filthy names and you have been trained not to respond, not to yell back. Have your hands zip-tied behind your back and you are thrown in a bus and you go to jail in Washington, D.C., as I did on August the 1st in 2014, and you do not spit and you do not talk back to those who are grabbing you. Unfortunately, when Barack Obama was in office, that's when I had to go. It killed me. It crushed me. But we were begging for change, for leadership to address immigration issues. Can you believe that? It was 2014. He did what he could. He did what he could, Obama. What we are doing today, as MLK was doing all those years ago, was protesting the enactment of unjust laws. Theologian Paul Tillich stated that sin is a separation. What we are witnessing today is unjust laws that force separation of families, legal citizens, and non-legal ones. So let us recall that when law enforcement in the North rounded up slaves who fled from the South, these actions were legal. And we should never forget that everything Adolf Hitler did in Germany was considered legal. An unjust law, wrote King, is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. To put it in terms of St. Thomas Aquinas, any law that uplifts human personality is just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. I am grateful right now for the ability to peacefully assemble. And yet I realize the fragility of such an endeavor in these challenging, heart-wrenching times. As Martin Luther King Jr. stated from a dingy hall in Birmingham all those years ago, now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm, lifting our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. We are all about human dignity. As I close, I'll mirror the words of MLK, who ended his letter with this quote: "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, may the radiant stars of love, brotherhood, sisterhood, may it shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." So grateful for a fantastic wordsmith whose words still give us hope for today. Blessed be, may it be so. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for the hearts that ache. Know that you are surrounded by a community and that we're doing what we can. It's part of our calling of faith. Blessed be.